Hello, welcome back. Right, this is our next traditional Scottish tale, so like our Scottish fairy tale. This one's called the Tale of Tam Lin, and it's a bit different to our other one. It's a bit more sort of a darker, slightly scarier one than our one from the Selkie Girl, but still a very good tale and with very good illustrations, which I love. Okay, so we'll get into this one. You can see the forest. Tells you it's going to be a bit dark. Once upon a time, a girl called Janet lived in the Scottish borderlands. Her father was the Laird of Carterhaugh, who owned many fields and hills and the beautiful Carterhaugh woods. Janet was allowed to walk in the fields and on the hills, but she wasn't allowed to walk into the woods. All the children of the borders had been told the story of a boy called Tam Lin, who'd been stolen by the fairies in Carterhaugh woods. They were told the story of a fierce fairy knight who now guarded the woods for the fairy queen, and they were told never to go into those woods. They look pretty scary and pretty dark along this side here. But Janet didn't believe in fairy stories, and Janet didn't like being told what to do. So one bright October day, she crept out of the laird's house and strode into the Carterhaugh woods. She walked through the tall trees, she nibbled at the ripe fruit, and she listened to the tiny birds calling. She found a stone well with a rose bush growing beside it and reached out to pick a late blooming flower on a thorny twig. The stem snapped, and Jeanette heard a voice from above her. "The fairy queen won't like that." She looked up, and a young man was sitting in a tree. "The fairy queen doesn't like people stealing fruit or flowers in her woods." "But these aren't her woods. These are my father's woods. Anyway, I don't believe in the fairy queen or fairy stories." The young man vanished out of the tree and appeared standing right in front of Janet. "Did you believe that?" Janet laughed. "Are you a fairy?" He smiled. "Yes, but I wasn't born a fairy. I was taken by the fairies when I was a little boy, and I've grown up into a fairy knight." He stopped smiling and drew his pale silver sword. "You must give that flower back, and you must leave these woods and never return." But Janet held tight to the flower. "Are you Tam Lin, the boy who was stolen in these woods?" "Yes, I am. How did you know?" "Because you are still missed. People would be so glad to see you come home." Janet told Tam Lin that long ago, when his pony had trotted back without him, his family searched and searched, and they wept for him. All the local children still sang songs about being stolen by fairies. And Tam Lin lowered his sword. You can see he's holding his sword up there. Janet asked, "Do you like being a fairy?" "Of course, because I'm magical and powerful here in the woods." "But aren't you trapped here, working for the fairy queen forever? Wouldn't you like to be human again? Wouldn't you like to leave the woods?" Tam Lin shrugged. "The fairy queen's magic is too strong for me to break on my own. I would help you." "Why?" "Because I believe that a boy stolen by fairies should be allowed to walk back out of the woods." Tam Lin looked round slowly at the beautiful trees and the shining well, and he nodded. Then he whispered to Jeanette, telling her how to break the fairy queen's power over him. Janet promised that she would free him and then left the woods, still carrying the fairy queen's rose. We can see Tam Lin up there in the tree, just behind Janet. Once the bright October day had turned to night, Janet slipped away from the Halloween party in the laird's house. She crept through the woods to the well and hid beside the rose bush. At midnight, she heard the fairy queen's army marching through all the fairy queen's lands on Halloween night. A fairy knight rode past on a black horse, leading a line of fairy soldiers with bows and arrows. Another fairy knight rode past on a brown horse, leading a line of fairy soldiers with spears. Then Janet saw a white horse approach, ridden by Tam Lin, who had one hand gloved and one hand bare. Janet remembered Tam Lin's plan and her promise, and she knew that now was her chance to break the fairy queen's power. So she leapt up and grabbed Tam Lin's bare hand and pulled him from his horse. A voice screeched from high above, "Let him go, girl! He is mine forever!" "No!" shouted Janet, and she wrapped her arms around Tam Lin and held him tight. With one word, the Fairy Queen turned Tam Lin into a snake, and the snake hissed in Janet's face, but she didn't let go. The Fairy Queen turned Tam Lin into a wildcat, and the wildcat scratched Janet's arms, but she didn't let go. The Fairy Queen then turned Tam Lin into a swan, and the swan's wings beat at Janet's shoulders, but she didn't let go. The Fairy Queen turned Tam Lin into a stag, and the stag's antlers bruised Janet's ribs, but she didn't let go. The Fairy Queen turned Tam Lin into a wolf, and the wolf snarled and growled and bit at Janet's sleeves, but she didn't let go. Finally, the Fairy Queen turned Tam Lin into a burning branch. Janet remembered the plan and the promise, and Janet knew that she now held all the power, and she threw the burning branch into the well, and the flame fizzled out. There's Janet holding her burning branch. Tam Lin climbed out of the water dripping wet and laughing. The Fairy Queen screamed as her power over Tam Lin drained away. She doesn't look too happy there. Janet and Tam Lin ran out of the woods together. "Now, do you believe in fairy stories?" asked Tam Lin. "Yes, I do," Janet smiled. "And do you believe in happy ever after?" So the boy who had been stolen by the fairies and the girl who had resisted the Fairy Queen walked towards the laird's house, leaving the woods behind them. So they've gone from the woods all the way back home. It finishes with this lovely picture. See if I can get in that. Of them walking away from the sword. So that was the tale of Tam Lin. I love those stories, those traditional Scottish stories. I'm very into my myths and legends, much like that story that we read at the start of the year, going back many months now, where it had all those different tales of enchantment in it as well. They were really good. But I hope you enjoyed that. So tomorrow, we're going to be moving on to a new book, and I love this new book. It's really, really funny, and everyone's going to enjoy this, I think. Okay. So I'll see you for that tomorrow.